Tonight, we begin with a development that senior advocacy groups had feared, financial planners had warned about, and policy experts had been tracking for months. A regulatory shift that unfolded not over years of deliberation, but in a matter of weeks. Weeks that could reshape retirement income for millions. Weeks that could force difficult choices about healthcare coverage. Weeks that could fundamentally alter the retirement landscape as we know it. What federal agencies finalized today crossed a threshold that senior advocates had hoped would hold. And when that threshold was crossed, organizations representing millions of retirees did not hesitate. They responded with detailed analysis, urgent warnings, and immediate calls to action. For 18 months now, there had been signals, not official announcements, not formal proposals, just signals, that the Social Security Administration and Medicare were preparing something unprecedented. These agencies have been understaffed, yes, but they have been methodical in their understaffing. Their regulatory changes have followed a certain rhythm, a predictability, almost a formula. But what set off alarm bells in senior advocacy circles this January was that the rhythm went silent. Financial advisors who monitor benefit regulations know the indicators. The pre-announcement comment periods, the stakeholder briefings, the gradual rollout of draft language, the sudden acceleration of implementation timelines. All of that went quiet, and whenever federal agencies overseeing trillions in senior benefits go quiet, it means something is about to get loud. Early Tuesday morning, the Federal Register published what officials described as comprehensive modernization of benefit calculation frameworks, including cost of living adjustment modifications that had not been implemented in over 4 decades. These are the kinds of regulatory changes that federal agencies only deploy when they are signaling something very specific: budget constraints, demographic pressures, or fundamental program restructuring. Policy analysts didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that the Social Security Administration was changing its operational framework. And when agencies managing America's largest safety net programs shift their framework without extensive public consultation, even by seemingly small measures, retirement planners pay attention. The changes affect 3 critical areas: earnings calculation periods, spousal benefit formulas, and the methodology for determining full retirement age adjustments. For Americans currently between 60 and 65, those in the critical window before claiming benefits, these modifications could mean differences measured not in dollars, but in thousands of dollars annually. The advisory issued by AARP and the National Committee to Preserve Social Security tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Senior advocacy leaders after emergency strategy sessions described the regulatory changes as accelerated beyond normal timelines, implemented without adequate public input, and perhaps most importantly, structured in ways that disproportionately affect middle-income seniors who plan their retirements based on existing formulas. But regulatory pressure only works if the affected population remains unaware. Senior advocates did not allow that. In fact, their response today was among the most coordinated we've seen in retirement policy advocacy. Here's what we know. Within 48 hours of the Federal Register publication, advocacy organizations mobilized informational campaigns across all 50 states. These weren't the typical awareness efforts. These were comprehensive response initiatives, digital town halls, personalized benefit calculators, and direct constituent outreach, tools that these organizations only deploy when they are preparing to challenge regulatory overreach. Tonight, policy researchers confirmed that the new regulations modify benefit calculations for 3 specific demographics, including early retirees who had recently been counting on existing formulas for what financial planners believed was adequate retirement security. The changes take effect before many current 62-year-olds can adjust their claiming strategies. They affect widow and widower benefits. They affect spousal coordination strategies. They affect delayed retirement credits that were likely being counted on for inflation protection. In other words, federal agencies targeted the precise calculation methodologies that retirement planners had been using for decades, the foundational assumptions that would have made traditional strategies optimal. This is what made senior advocates' warnings so urgent. The regulatory changes weren't just procedural, they were substantive. They represented the kind of modifications that could reduce lifetime benefits by 5 to 7% if beneficiaries don't adjust their claiming strategies. And advocacy organizations, understanding that fully, responded with information campaigns. Not emotionally, not politically, but educationally. They didn't create panic. They didn't spread misinformation. They provided accurate benefit calculators. They offered one-on-one counseling resources. And here's where the story becomes even more consequential. Budget analysts now believe that the administration's latest regulatory changes were designed to test the awareness level of near retirees after years of declining financial literacy among older Americans. Policymakers wanted to see whether seniors would adjust their strategies proactively. But instead, the opposite happened. Senior advocacy groups didn't remain passive. They launched educational initiatives that were so comprehensive, so targeted, that even congressional offices took notice. You don't get congressional attention on technical benefit regulations easily, but today, senior advocates did. Financial planners speaking with industry publications described the regulatory approach as stealth austerity, a way to reduce long-term obligations without explicit benefit cuts. But advocacy organizations proved today that they remain both vigilant and effective. Their mobilization efforts were not only swift, they were coordinated so precisely that within 72 hours, over 3 million seniors had accessed new benefit calculators. That engagement level matters because it shows that retirement security remains a galvanizing issue. It shows that seniors are not passive recipients of policy changes. They are informed consumers demanding transparency. As reports continued coming in throughout the week, we learned more about the scale of the regulatory impact. The National Council on Aging published detailed analyses, forcing mainstream media coverage that had initially overlooked the changes. Regional senior centers that had been quiet on policy matters in the last decade suddenly became hubs of information sharing. Financial advisory firms operating nationwide reportedly updated their retirement planning software to reflect scenarios seniors might face under the modified formulas. This wasn't just typical regulatory adjustment. This wasn't just technical clarification. This was fundamental recalculation. This was structural reformation. And structural reformation is the one thing the retirement planning industry has struggled to communicate effectively since the system became so complex. For every government efficiency initiative they have introduced, advocates have countered with something that highlights real-world consequences for real people. Remember, policymakers thought seniors wouldn't notice technical changes to calculation methodologies. They thought advocacy organizations lacked the resources for rapid response. They thought the complexity would create confusion rather than mobilization. But this week, the exact opposite is happening. Seniors are seeking information proactively. Advocacy groups are coordinating across organizational boundaries. Financial planners are updating their guidance in real time. What makes this moment so critical and so revealing is that these regulatory changes happened at a time when the Social Security Trust Fund is under genuine solvency pressure. Progressive advocates want benefit expansions. Fiscal conservatives want cost containment. Middle-income retirees want predictability. Future beneficiaries want system sustainability. Agency administrators are balancing these demands while managing congressional oversight from both parties. And when agencies in that position make sudden regulatory moves, they're not doing it from abundance. They're doing it from constraint. They're doing it from necessity. The Social Security Administration's implementation guidance, now distributed through field offices nationwide, was designed to signal that the agency is not willing to delay necessary modernization. Officials said plainly that the previous calculation methods were inconsistent with current actuarial requirements and demographic realities. That is bureaucratic language for the old formulas don't match our funding projections anymore, and we're adjusting whether you like it or not. You don't usually hear that directness from federal benefits administrators unless something serious is at stake. Meanwhile, the executive director of the Strengthened Social Security Coalition addressed members in a measured factual briefing tonight. She said, "These changes affect calculations that millions of Americans have been counting on for their financial security." She said, "We're not opposing modernization. We're demanding transparency and adequate transition periods." And she said, When agencies change the rules this close to people's retirement dates, it's not reform, it's disruption. These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from organizations that understand just how high the stakes have become. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. The Social Security changes weren't isolated. Along with the benefit calculation modifications, Medicare also announced premium structure adjustments affecting Part B and Part D coverage. The IRS updated required minimum distribution tables affecting retirement account withdrawals. The Department of Labor modified pension plan disclosure requirements affecting defined benefit recipients. All of this happened within the same 6-week period. When multiple agencies affecting retirement income move simultaneously, it means something larger is underway. Policy analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that federal agencies are preparing for unified retirement policy reforms in the 2026 fiscal year. Another is that administrators are attempting to shore up program finances ahead of trustee reports. A third possibility, the one worrying financial planners the most, is that agencies are attempting to reduce long-term obligations without congressional authorization through technical regulatory changes. But this week, senior advocates took that card off the table. They didn't ignore the Federal Register notices. They didn't assume someone else would sound the alarm. They didn't wait for mainstream media coverage. They mobilized immediately and comprehensively. What we're watching now is a test of civic engagement. Federal agencies want to see whether technical changes can be implemented without significant public pushback. Senior advocates want to show that their constituencies remain informed and activated. Congressional oversight committees want to prevent regulatory overreach, and future retirees want to prevent precedents that could affect them in coming decades. Tonight, we've heard from financial planning associations who are now hosting emergency webinars for their clients. They say the regulatory changes require immediate strategy reassessment for anyone within 5 years of claiming benefits. They say individualized analysis has become essential rather than optional. And they say the administration's decision to implement these changes with minimal transition periods is likely part of broader deficit reduction efforts intended to demonstrate fiscal responsibility. But seniors are not accepting these changes passively. In fact, seniors are engaging more actively than agencies apparently anticipated. Their response this week, informed, organized, and sustained, sent a message to policymakers that retirement security remains non-negotiable. And it sent a message to younger workers that they need to pay attention to these systems long before retirement. As the implementation period continues, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly administrators hope to achieve with accelerated timelines. But what we do know is that the advocacy community's response was essential. It created awareness where there was confusion. It provided tools where there was uncertainty. And it demonstrated that seniors remain a powerful constituency when mobilized around concrete issues. What happens next will depend on what congressional oversight committees do in the next 90 days. If they demand public hearings and transition period extensions, this moment will be remembered as democracy working through checks and balances. If they allow implementation to proceed unchanged, advocacy organizations have already shown they are prepared to sustain information campaigns. They have shown they are ready to protect their members' interests. And tonight, for the first time in decades, federal benefits administrators appear to be encountering organized, informed resistance to technical regulatory changes. The comment period is still open, but the window is closing. And when regulatory windows close on issues affecting tens of millions of Americans, the consequences become permanent. Because tonight, policymakers learned something they should have known all along. Seniors vote at higher rates than any other demographic. They share information through extensive networks, and they will not allow their benefits to be reduced through regulatory complexity without making their voices heard. This story is far from over, but tonight, one thing is clear. Retirement security remains a defining issue for millions of Americans. Information campaigns can still mobilize constituencies effectively. And the 2026 benefit changes will be implemented with far more public scrutiny than administrators apparently anticipated. And we will be here, watching every regulatory development as the next phase of this retirement policy debate unfolds.